They want to know how an inmate was able to get a gun, shoot and kill a food service worker at Smith State Prison before turning the gun on himself.
That's about already under federal investigation. A warden arrested for contraband smuggling. And a correctional officer murdered in the line of duty. This isn't just a dangerous place. It's a systemic disaster waiting to explode. In January of 2024, a 24-year-old mother named Aureon Grace walked through those gates for a kitchen shift. And she never walked out alive. This is the truth behind the Smith State Prison tragedy. Smith State Prison sits in Glenville, Georgia, deep in Tattnall County, in the lower coastal plain of the state's southeast region. It is a closed security facility. On any given day, more than 1,500 inmates are housed behind those walls. The grounds stretch across multiple housing units, reinforced perimeter fencing, armed watchtowers, and a front entrance equipped with metal detectors that every person, staff, visitor, contractor must pass through before stepping inside. On paper, that is a facility built to contain anything. In reality, Smith State had been fracturing long before Aureon Grace ever set foot there. In February of the year prior, the prison's own warden, Bryan Adams, was arrested. The charges against him were not minor: racketeering, bribery, falsifying statements, violating his oath of public office. Every single one of those charges was tied to a contraband smuggling operation that had been running through the facility on his watch. He was fired. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation took over the case. And what that investigation exposed was not a handful of rogue officers cutting corners on the floor. The corruption had reached the very top. The man whose job it was to set the standard, to enforce the rules, to protect the staff, was the one running the operation. Bryan Adams had been promoted to warden in 2019. Within a few years, he was behind bars himself. Then, just months after his arrest, another blow. In October of that same year, a 42-year-old correctional officer named Robert Clark was killed inside Smith State Prison. Clark was doing his job escorting inmates through the facility when one of them attacked him from behind with a homemade weapon. He did not survive. A second inmate who stepped in to help him was also struck. Officer Clark became the first staff member to be fatally attacked at that facility. He would not be the last. And layered beneath all of it, the Georgia Department of Corrections was already operating under a federal probe. The United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division had an active investigation into the state's prison system, an investigation that had been running since September of 2021, with no public findings released. So when Aureon Grace walked into Smith State Prison for her first shift, she wasn't walking into just a prison. She was walking into a facility where the warden had been arrested for smuggling contraband, a correctional officer had just been killed on the floor, and federal investigators had been watching the whole system for years. That is the environment she walked into, and that context is not background noise, it is everything. Aureon Grace was 24 years old and from Statesboro, Georgia. She grew up there, graduated from Statesboro High School, and built her life right there in her hometown. The people closest to her described a woman who was warm, genuinely caring, and fully present for the people around her. She had a laugh that could pull anyone in, a smile that her family said was entirely her own. She had 2 children, a 4-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son. Those 2 kids were the engine behind every single decision she made. Her family has been open about the kind of mother she was, the kind who would work 11 to 14 days straight, back-to-back shifts, without complaint, because her children needed to be taken care of, and she was going to be the one to do it. No excuses, no shortcuts, She showed up. Aureon also had a specific goal she was working toward. She was saving money to go to nursing school. Healthcare was the direction she was heading. A stable career, a better income, a future she was building one paycheck at a time. She wasn't spinning her wheels. She had a plan, and she was executing it. So she took a job with Aramark, a Philadelphia-based company that holds the food services contract at Smith State Prison in Glenville. Her position was in the kitchen, prepping and serving meals for the inmate population. She commuted in from Statesboro every day, showed up, did her job, and went home to her kids. She was a young woman doing everything right. That is who Aureon Grace was. Not a reckless person, not someone looking for trouble. A mother, a worker, a woman trying to give her children a better life than the one she was starting from. And she walked into a broken system that was never going to protect her. If you believe this story deserves to be heard, subscribe to Hidden Crime Files. We don't stop until the truth is uncovered. J'Dreickus Hart was 34 years old. He had been incarcerated at Smith State Prison since 2015, convicted in Carroll County, Georgia, for voluntary manslaughter and aggravated battery, crimes he committed in 2013. He was serving a 20-year sentence. His maximum release date sat at June of 2043. That is nearly 2 full decades from where he was sitting when Aureon started her job. He had already spent close to 10 years inside. He had just as many still ahead of him. There was no parole on the horizon, no life waiting for him on the other side of those walls anytime soon. Hart had been placed on kitchen detail. That is not an automatic assignment. Inmates who earn a spot in the kitchen are generally those whose conduct inside the facility has been deemed controlled enough to allow supervised movement beyond their housing unit. Kitchen detail means you are around civilians. It means daily contact with people who are not inmates. It means a consistent, repeated routine alongside staff. Hart was also reportedly active on social media while inside. That is not a small detail. Inmates are not permitted to have phones. The fact that he had one and was using it regularly tells you exactly what kind of access contraband had inside that facility. Access the warden's own arrest had already confirmed ran deep. It was in that kitchen that Hart and Aureon met. Same shift, same space. Every morning, somewhere in those early months, a personal relationship developed between them. The Georgia Department of Corrections confirmed this. The precise details, how it started, how far it went, were never fully disclosed to the public. What is known is that it happened, and it was in direct violation of the policy that every employee at a correctional facility is made aware of before their first day. Aureon knew the rules. Anyone who takes a job inside a prison knows those rules. But Hart was, by multiple accounts, charming, deliberate in how he engaged with people. And he had something that people on the outside rarely have. Time. Time to pay attention. Time to be consistent. Time to make someone feel seen. Inside an environment designed to be cold and transactional, that kind of focused attention can feel like something real. And for a young woman working long shifts in an already compromised institution, that line between professional and personal had very little protecting it. Running alongside everything that was developing between Hart and Aureon, something else had already been moving inside Smith State Prison for months. Investigators later determined that a firearm was introduced into the facility sometime between late June and early July of the previous year, more than 6 months before Aureon ever stepped through the front gate. The weapon was allegedly thrown over the outer perimeter fence. That reinforced fence that was supposed to be one of the hard lines between the inside world and the outside one. Someone threw a gun over it, and it cleared. Once it was inside, it did not sit still. It moved, passed from one inmate to the next through the facility's internal network, each handoff keeping it in circulation and keeping it out of the sight of any staff. Weapons do not move like that in a well-run prison. They move like that in a place where the informal networks have more power than the official ones, and where the people in charge either cannot see it or choose not to look. Eventually, J'Dreickus Hart became the person holding it, trusted by the people around him to keep it. And by the time Aureon started her job, the exact same month she walked in for her first shift, inmates with contraband phones were already taking photographs of that gun and passing those images around inside the facility. A firearm had been openly circulating inside a maximum security prison for months. Staff did not stop it. Administration did not find it. Nobody pulled it from the walls. It was there, and Aureon Grace had no idea. Aureon Grace went to work one morning and did not come home. Her 4-year-old daughter and her 1-year-old son lost their mother inside the walls of a facility that was supposed to be the most controlled environment in the state. This case is not just about what one man did. It is about what an entire system failed to do. For years, repeatedly, at every level. A warden who was running contraband. An officer who was killed with a homemade weapon. A gun that sat inside those walls for months while it passed from hand to hand. And a young mother who was never given a safe place to do her job. Aureon was doing everything right. She was working. She was saving. She was raising her children. She walked into a system that failed her at every turn, and she paid the highest price. We are still waiting for real accountability, not a press release, not a statement of disappointment from a commissioner. Accountability. What do you think when a system is this broken? Who is ultimately responsible? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this case moved you, share it, because Aureon Grace's children deserve to know that their mother's story was not buried. Subscribe to Hidden Crime Files for more cases that don't get the coverage they deserve. Every like, every share, it keeps this channel going. I'll see you in the next one.